go there. Well, I just had a little thought today while I was at work, and I thought, this is quite funny. You know how the things that go on in the world are all premeditated. Everything that happens now, we think, oh, they've just thought up these silly plans and all these things are getting put into place. But they've all been premeditated for a long time, many years in advance. So this is one of the things I just had a thought today, and I don't know why I'm thinking this, and this is only my opinion, and I find it quite funny. But you know, they're talking about the 15-minute cities, and they're talking about getting everybody into one, and everybody will be on universal credit, and so everyone will be poor, and we'll have no cars, and we won't even have cash because they'll be taking all that away, and we'll be going digital. So then we're going to be going on to this credit system. So a bit like China, same as China. So I was thinking about it today, and I thought, it's not something that I want to go with, but it's been put out there as a really positive thing. But because everything's preordained and pre-planned, something inside my head today thought, I've kind of already lived in a 15-minute area. So I'm going to go back to the 1970s. So I was brought up on a council estate, and it was quite a big one, and it was in 3 sections, so we called it the top, the middle and the bottom. And on that estate we had 3 schools, we had doctors, shops, there was a chemist, there was entertainment, so you had the community centre, you had the adventure playground for the children, there was the churches, there were 2 churches in the place at the time, and all of these things were like full on, and there was so much going on there. There was activities on all the time. So you had scouts, brownies, clubs from the church, you had the youth clubs, they had bingo, they had 3 pubs in the area as well. We had 2 mills while I was there. They're gone now. The pubs are gone now. But we're just going to stick to the 1970s, and I think I might do a big talk about this on my weekly live this weekend, and talk about life back then compared to now. And so I was just thinking, this is quite interesting, because when you went back to this time, everybody was poor, and because we lived on a council estate, you couldn't really distinguish between who were the poorest in a way. You could sort of make out which families were really, really dirt poor, but we were all kind of on the same money. So let's pretend we was all on universal credit, because everyone was on low income. Back in those days, up until I think it was early 80s when people started buying council houses. So up until then, the council houses weren't bought either. So they were all council. So nobody had more than anyone else, really. And each street that was on the estate, there may have been 1 or maybe 2 cars, but most people didn't have a car. So we went to the schools in that neighbourhood. We caught buses everywhere into town and back. We went to the doctors there, all our entertainment was there, all our friends were there, most of my family were there. We were pretty much living in a 15-minute neighbourhood, because that was our world. Everything that we wanted was there. Now, the 2 mills were operating at the time, so they had people working there as well. And a lot of the people that did go to work outside of the estate was only like a 15-minute bus ride away, so most people worked in the town. So everybody was pretty much closed in, and it was like a 15-minute city, so we were all on the same sort of income, living in the same kind of housing, with no transport. And with this 15-minute city thing, when you read about it, when they do proposals for things like this, they always make it out as a positive. Like, you're going to love this. We're going to have everything that you want all on your doorstep, and it'll be fantastic because you don't have to go anywhere. You won't need a car. You just need a bike. Just walk. You'll get nice and fit. But you've got to stay in that location. And they're not telling people that part. They're sort of like brush out the edges of what they're on about, so people just hear what they want to hear, and they think, well, that'll be so convenient because you've got your supermarket, shops, everything's just there, you can just walk to it, that's great, isn't it? But what they're not talking about is how trapped you are. Now, because we've come from a place of freedom, because most people today have got cars, and a lot of people do own their own houses as well, and you've got people working outside of the minimum wage as well, so we've got the middle class, and I mean, we had it back then as well, but what they're wanting to do is get us all on the same level, so eliminate the middle class, so we're all working poor again. And what's really interesting is I'm tying in a few things together on this one, but the universal credit, I spoke to someone who worked for Universal Credit, and this is going back a few years, and what had happened is I've had periodic times of being on benefits, and about 3 years ago I got a letter from DWP saying you owe us, I think it was £2,500, and I phoned them up and said I don't owe you anything, and they said you do, because in 2008 you were claiming working tax credits, and I went, well, yeah, and because I was entitled to it, and they said, yeah, but we overpaid you, and I couldn't prove that they didn't, and they couldn't prove that they did, so they just took authority and took the money anyway, so they're taking that money whether I like it or not, and I don't know how to appeal this one, because I've tried, and I appealed it, and they appealed themselves, and came back and said that they were right. So they're a law to themselves. But the point I'm making is, the person who I talked to on the phone that time said, you've got to understand what universal credit means. And I said, I know what it means. It means it's an income you're entitled to, extra income. And he went, no. Universal means everybody. That means everyone. It's a universal money thing. So everybody is going on it. And credit means you're going to pay it back somehow. Credit is like a loan. So I'm going to give you some credit, right? So, but you've got to earn it. And I didn't think about it at the time. But the way that things are going in the world now, and you're talking about these 15-minute cities, I kind of, in a way, have already been indoctrinated to cope with that. And that sounds ridiculous. But we're going back to the 70's again. We all lived in the same place, and that was our world, and we didn't go out of it very much because we didn't have money. My family were better off than a lot of them there, because I had a nana who lived by the seaside, and so we would go once a year on a coach and go and stay at her house. So that was our holiday. And as we got older, we'd go on other little holidays to the seaside. But the world was that place basically, and a lot of children never left it until you went to senior school. Your schooling and everything was all within 15 minutes of where you lived, and we had all these resources, and everything was there on the doorstep, and you didn't need to go anywhere else. I mean, back in the day, you had the milkman come to the house and put the milk on the doorstep. You had the bread man came round once a week with his van. There was the potato man, and he sold vegetables as well. People came to you with the food, and we didn't have big supermarkets either, so it was all the small shops. So our world was within a 15-minute place, really. And this is where they're wanting us to go back to. And it's kind of funny because this last 10 years I've been on an adventure, and I left England and came to Scotland, and it's been rough and good. It's been a mixed bag because it's been an adventure, and I've had to learn niche ways to live. But the thought of what's coming isn't really nice, and it's a case of having to be aware of what they've got in plans for us, because if you look online and you put in 15-minute cities and put in smart cities, they're all pretty much the same. So these are all going to be locations put all around the world. So I was reading earlier about the 10 15-minute cities that have got put into place, or getting put into place in the UK. So they're from the south up to Scotland, 10 of them. And they're talking like this is going to be fantastic because you've got the 5G infrastructure, and we're going to make it all so that people won't even need to have a car. That's something you won't need. And they try and sell it as it's a really cool thing. You'll have lots of time for yourself because you won't have to travel a long way to work, which means they plan on taking your jobs. You won't need a car. So they're taking away our autonomy, which means we're all going to be trapped together like we was in the 70's. And because when we go back to the 70's, because that's all I knew, it was accepted. So all these children now, if they get put into these 15-minute cities, they're going to just accept that this is life and it's how it is. And when you go back even further than the 70's and go back to the times like before Industrial Revolution, most people lived in very small places together, all huddled up together in overcrowded housing, and they all worked in the same neighbourhood where they lived. And so this concept of travel was only for the rich. The poor people didn't travel unless they had a trade that would take them from one town to another. And there was no need for people to travel because they had everything they wanted. People used to find the love, like the partners in the neighbourhood they lived in. The friends were there, the family was there, the work was there, the food came to them there. And that's where they want us back. And the problem that we've got now is we've been spoilt for the last so many years, because we got to a point where a lot of us could afford cars, and then along came the cheap travel to go abroad, and people got used to going abroad. Even poor people could afford to go on a flight and go abroad. I remember you could get a flight to like Amsterdam or Paris for like £15-20 return, because they'd do these super deals and people would take them up, and it was actually cheaper to go abroad than stay in our own country. But this is all getting taken away. And I know when I've spoken to people about this 15-minute cities, a lot of people are going, oh, it'll be a great idea because it's carbon, it cuts down on carbon emissions. And I'm laughing, and I'm like, the people who are putting these infrastructures in place, I'd call them whatever you want, whether it's the overlords or the archons or the demons or the government, call them whatever you want. They all have private jets. And if you look how much emissions come out of a small jet, and they're travelling all over the world in these private jets, but they're saying to us, we don't want you to have a car because it's not good for the environment. And you're like, there's always something behind it. And it's funny because I was looking at a video today, and this guy, he tried to go abroad in his electric car, and they wouldn't let him on the ferry, or I think it was a ferry. And they said, we can't let your car on here because there's a danger it'll set on fire. And we couldn't stop laughing. So they've invented something that's useless, and people are going for that. And it's like all because of the carbon thing. And they need petrol generators to charge them up if you break down. So the irony. But what do you think about the 15-minute cities? Have you looked into them? Have you looked into them properly? There's a video, I wanted to link it actually, and it's of a 15-minute city, and I think it's in a suburb in China, and it's absolutely hell. And what it is it's they've got like 3 big apartment blocks, and they house around 100,000 people. So the big blocks of flats, and they're in the middle of absolutely bloody nowhere, and they house thousands and thousands of people, and it was a trial. And what they did is they sold them a lie, and they said, this is going to be fantastic, because on the ground floor of all these tower block things, you've got shopping malls and hairdressers, you've got your doctors there, schools, you've got everything you want all there, and we'll give you jobs there. So you're all in this compound, and you don't need nothing, you don't need cars, you don't need nothing. And all these people thought, oh, this sounds great, so they all volunteered to go there. I must find the video, and I'll put a link up after, and they were all on about it, how they all got sold into this, and they all thought it was great. And each apartment employed somebody to keep the watch on everyone, and they were like inspectors, and they'd walk around with notepads and pens type thing, and they'd watch everybody. And I'm going to make this part up now because you've got to watch the video, but everyone was given like a basic point system. So let's say everybody started off the day with 5 points. If you did something that upset somebody, or if you dropped a piece of rubbish, or if you called in sick at work, or if you did anything that they deemed to be negative, then you got points knocked off. And if you did positive things, like you went to your own job and then you did voluntary work after your job, and then you did something nice for the neighbours, then you got points awarded. And so it was a point system. And there were people there they interviewed that were saying, we don't get any food. We don't get food because the point system is basically our food. So if we don't comply and do what we're told and do all these good deeds, then we get money knocked off that pays for the food, so we don't eat properly. And there were some guys saying that they don't eat much at all because they keep doing things wrong, because it's built in some of us to be rebellious. But you're not allowed to question anything there. You're not allowed to say something, because they'll just knock a point off your credit thing. Another thing, they had no vehicles, no cars, and because they were in quite a remote-ish location, you couldn't just walk out because it was too far away from everywhere else. And so they'd done it on purpose and trapped all these people. And what made it even worse is they were making everybody work until there was something ridiculous, like 85 years old. It was something really old. And they said, if you get to 85, then you don't have to do nothing anymore. But they were making elderly people work and do voluntary work and contribute to the society that they lived in. And you could see them falling apart, these people. And so some of them were trying their best to comply just to keep alive. But the mental health you could see was struggling. You could see the unhappiness in people. But it gets to a point where you can't say you're unhappy because you get points knocked off. And this is where they're wanting us to go. And it's total compliance. It's like the Hunger Games. You're going to do as you're told, or you're not going to get nothing. And if you don't get nothing, that affects your family as well. Because these people were saying if they got their points taken so they couldn't have their daily quota of food, that meant they had to eat some of their family's food, which is like taking off their plate, which then caused resentment from them. Like, you're taking our food. So the family started to clash. And if they were heard arguing, one of the neighbours could complain to one of the wardens and say, there's something going on in that flat, and they'd all get points knocked off them for being unsociable neighbours. It's absolutely frightening what is coming. And when they were interviewing one of the guys there, they were saying, why don't you just leave? And he just wanted to cry, and he said, how? I have no money and I have no means to go. You can't get a ticket unless you've got a certain amount of points, and I can't get to that level where I can get out of here, so I can't leave. And that is what they're going to do. And I would ask anybody who doesn't know anything about the 15-minute cities to go and have a look at them. and come back and tell me what you think, because I can't see how this is going to pan out well at all. I came from a place where I was kind of indoctrinated. Well, we've all been indoctrinated, but I was in a place where we had everything we wanted during those 70's. And you didn't even think of the world outside of there. And this is what's going to be coming for our future generations if we don't protest it or do something, because I'm not going to one. But if you noticed, if you go to places like, well, I'm going to look at the places recently, which is in the States, like California, I've forgotten which other places there were, but they've got all these big floods going on, and all this, just the weather is gone absolutely shocking, and all these places are getting wiped out from floods, earthquakes, whatever, big bad weather system things. Coincidentally, all these little towns and all these little places in the countryside and in the nice places are getting wiped out, and they just so happen to be on the map for 15-minute city. It's just a coincidence though. It's not real. You know, if you say anything about it, you're like, oh yeah. It's just a coincidence that the weather system is so shocking there that it's wiped out thousands of homes and left people homeless or dead. I mean, a lot of people didn't even survive some of them things. But they're all in line for the 15-minute cities. I think New York's lined up for one. I know that in England it's Edinburgh down to Ipswich and places like that, all the way up there. But the States have got loads of them all lined up, and I think Australia has, and Europe, because I think I read that Milan is lined up for one, and Paris. So Europe and the States, Australia, Canada, the UK that I'm aware of are all lined up for all these 15-minute cities. So if you don't know anything about them, go and check it out, and don't just check out like the media stuff. Go to the government sites, which are the official sites, and they will tell you, and go on to the like local council, and they will tell you what is in store. And if you live in a place of a 15-minute city now and you own your own house, I would sell up and get out, because if you take a look at what's going on in America, I would say that if they're wanting people out of where they're living now so they can build these cities, then they've got to get rid of you somehow, and the best way to do it is with the weather, which is just accidentally taking out the places where they're going to put these homes. So check it out and tell me what you think about it, and tell me I'm just a conspiracy theorist and I'm just, oh, here we go. But before you tell me I am, go and have a look at it and tell me if you think they're a great idea, and why you would love to live in a 15-minute city with no car, and to have everything you want within 15 minutes, so you never have to leave it, and then come back and sell me the idea that it's a great thing. We can debate this, because I'd like that. So I'll see you next time.